الله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونتوب إليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا من يهد الله فهو المهتد ومن يضلل فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. All praise is due to Allah. We praise Him and we seek help from Him. We ask forgiveness from Him, we repent to Him, and we seek refuge in Him from our own evils and our own bad deeds. Anyone who is guided by Allah is truly guided, and anyone who has been left astray, there is no one to guide him aright. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu taqullaha haqqa tuqatih wa la tamutunna illa wa antum muslimun. O you who believe, be aware of Allah with correct awareness, and die not except as Muslims. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu taqullaha wa qawlu qawlan sadida. O you who believe, keep your duty to Allah and fear Him, and speak always the truth. Before beginning, brothers and sisters, I'd like to establish that I seek refuge in Allah from misleading and from being misled, from betraying and from being betrayed into ignorance by others. I ask Allah to guide my heart and to guide my tongue. I declare belief in Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful. All praise is due to Allah, who created us, who created mankind, and did not leave him without guidance in the form of the Book of Allah and the Prophet Muhammad ibn Abdullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Wal asr innal insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa amilu salihati wa tawassaw bil haqq wa tawassaw bis sabr. Dear brothers and sisters, whenever you get an opportunity to address the people that you love, it's always a difficult task to know where to begin. I think that all parents and grandparents understand that when you address those that you love, whether it be your spouse, whether it be your parents, whether it be your children, when you come before those for whom you have deep affection, it's different than just having any other conversation or any other talk. You don't know quite where to start. And the Quran, of course, offers so many different avenues to begin and to give reminders, that alone is quite a task. My dear brothers and sisters, among whom those sitting out in front of us now, there are some young enough to be my grandchildren, and there are others old enough to be my parents. I would, as always, like to ask all of us to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for maintaining our seniors in our presence for so long that we may benefit from the journeys that they have taken. Also, this draws our attention to our obligation to our youth. We want to raise in them the sense of responsibility so that this journey, this wondrous journey of life, can be as enjoyable for them as possible. For purposes of clarity, I've began to start with the topic of today's talk is education. And I've broken it into 3 different parts. Hopefully that will make it clearer. First, we must provide our children with the basic education that is needed to integrate within society. This would cover social skills that they must learn at home. From us, they must learn how to control anger. The minute we start banging tables and screaming across the room, slamming down telephones, screaming their name or our spouse's name from another room, we're already teaching them those things that can lead to their ultimate failure. How do you address people that you live intimately with? How do you address people that you seem to be stronger than? How do you address people that you seem to be weaker than? They'll know how to talk to their bosses, but you're teaching them now how to talk to their spouses. From this level of education, later in life, their spouses may say, I don't know what your parents did, but thank them for nothing. Or they may say, Alhamdulillah, that your parents raised you and Allah gave you to me for a mate. The next level, we must have them educated properly so that they can function in society. We can't just sit back and allow their teachers to teach them. We must be very involved in finding out if they're having difficulties in school and how we can address those difficulties. That's the second level, how they can learn to function within society itself, earn a living, support themselves. But those also come from the previous one. How do you control anger, time? You must also provide them with a knowledge of self. Sometimes this gets swept under the rug. They must know who they are. Oldest admonition that we know of on the planet, know thyself. Didn't come from the Bible, predates 7,500 years at least. Know thyself. Who are you? Let's take one example. Many of the things that we go for education are not education. They seek to miseducate our young. Let's take the word terrorism. The dictionary definition is a person, usually a member of a group, who uses or advocates terrorism. A person who terrorizes or frightens others. There are several other definitions, but for most of the world, and more importantly for our children, a more abbreviated definition is all they need. Muslim. Our children, when they hear the word terrorism, they're waiting for Muslim to follow it, if they don't hear Muslim first. I would ask at this point, if you'll bear with me, so I can establish something by telling a slight story. Picture, if you will, a small village in the mountains during the 1920s, early part of the 20th century. The villagers have no modern conveniences, no running water, no electricity, living this way for hundreds of years. They move about performing menial tasks as villagers do. They're cleaning things, sweeping out their homes, feeding their livestock. Children are playing. The sun is risen, and they finish their Fajr prayers. And they begin to hear a sound they've never heard before. It's a heavy sound, a droning sound. They look into the sky, and they don't see anything at first, but all of a sudden they see these objects moving over the mountains. They're planes. They've never seen planes before. All of a sudden, these planes begin to drop explosive devices. When they strike the ground, they explode. Others, when they strike the ground, they release a gas and they can't breathe. They're strangling and choking. They're in a panic. Some try and flee for safety into houses, and some try and get out of houses. All of them are trying to help the disabled, the elderly, but they don't know where to help them to because this attack is everywhere. Throughout this attack, machine gun fire can be heard. Never seen that before either. But so pacific and so direct are these firings that even chickens begin to explode in front of their eyes. This is the first of 3 attacks for the day. The first of 3. Actually, the first of many, but the first of 3 for their village. These were the Kurds that they began to bomb in the Kurdish mountains in the 1920s under the orders of Air Marshal Winston Churchill, who thought nothing was wrong with using gas and explosive devices on people who had no arms. This happened May 30th, 1921. A few hours later, Tulsa, Oklahoma was attacked also from the air. They destroyed and killed 300 people. The same day they began to destroy the villages in the Kurdish mountains, they destroyed Black Wall Street. Aren't these acts of terror? Do our children know about these acts of terror? If you come from India, have you taught your children about the Sepoy revolt? Have you taught your children that their great-grandparents were starved to death by the British in the Second World War, where they would not give them the rice that had grown in the fields? Do they know that? Do they know that Italy attacked Ethiopia? Do they know that the African Americans wanted to come to the Ethiopian support, and they would not let any people of color go to Ethiopia, but any European who wanted to go to Italy was free to go? Do they know that? Do they know of the other attacks throughout India, Africa, Asia? Or do they only think that terror began with ISIS and Muslims in the Middle East? Is that what we allow them to be taught? Dear brothers and sisters, I'd like to give you one example. We talk about the welfare system in the United States, and many people associate the welfare system with nothing except African Americans. One of the great misconceptions of history. When they came from Europe, they discovered the Native American populations. They had taken care of their people for maybe 10,000 years. They hunted buffalo, they took grains. When they destroyed all the buffalo, intentionally wiped out their food source, when they put them on a reservation, when they told them you cannot hunt and you cannot fish and you cannot support your families. If you want something, you must come to me. Instantly, the wife began to tell her husband, Chief, these blankets are rotten. We can't use these. They're not going to last the winter. And this corn, most of it's not even good. We can't plant this. He has to tell his wife, if we run and get away, we'll starve. There's nothing out there. They've killed the animals. If we don't get away, they'll capture us, and they may break us up and send us to different areas. The wife realized, you can make a baby, but you can't support my child. This wasn't an accident. And it should sound very familiar to some of us. The welfare system was born there. But during this same time, they didn't just do it to us, African Americans. In Arabia, wasn't Saudi then, no oil. In India, wasn't Pakistan. They called us Negro, colored, African, no African Americans. We have worse names than that. But they called those in India and the Middle East, as they renamed it, the same things, and worse. Do our children know of the history of their great-grandparents? Do they know how they fought to preserve their land? Do they know that Islam is not just something they see their parents mistreat and misuse and only use to lecture them, but do they realize that members of their family gave their lives to secure these nations and to cure Islamic practice? That's an education too. We have to be conscious of the fact that this miseducation is not by accident. If we allow Europe to establish the curriculum for our children to learn, they'll learn. Many of them will go on to college, and they'll come out very successful. One of the African leaders explained to his young students as they went to Europe, we're not sending you there to come back with a wife. We're not sending you there to become Freemasons or join European secret societies. When you come back, I don't want to see any fancy handshakes. I want to hear that you've got some white apron in your home. We're sending you there to learn these technologies and to come back and to help your people. Do our children know that all these African brothers and sisters who sit among us right now, they're not from Africa any more than if we meet somebody from Saudi Arabia, we say, well, he's a Middle Easterner. He comes from Saudi Arabia. The African comes from Nigeria, Congo, Senegal. He comes from Somalia, Ethiopia, places that had civilization when the European had not even discovered what a shoe was. And now they're clustered into this grouping, and all they are is black or Abid. Do we teach our children to learn about people? Learn about things other than just these things that have been given you to learn by rote? Dear brothers and sisters, in 1591, the Moroccans went into Senegal to attack the Senegalese. Interesting point of history, maybe many of us don't know. The interesting point of it was they didn't just go as Moroccans. They had British armaments, cannons, rifles. Europe was back in these moves. It wasn't just Moroccans. Much of this descent that we find throughout the world, Italy attacking Ethiopia, the Kurds being bombed in their own villages, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Black Wall Street being destroyed. 1919, the troops came back from fighting in the First World War, and the racism was so great that they had riots all over the country, and they butchered, tortured, hung, lynched, and castrated these young men in their uniforms. So when we talk about miseducation, if we allow our children to believe that terrorism and Muslim are two synonymous words, the day may come when the word terrorist and terrorism will become in disuse. It'd be an antiquated word. And what will replace it? Muslim. We all know that Islam will triumph and Islam will gain ascendancy, and this way of life will at some point in history dominate the thinking of mankind. Our children may become the finest of Muslims, but neither of these things may occur because of us. They may occur in spite of us. And what an ugly thing to have our children become good Muslims, not because their fathers and mothers set such a wonderful example, but because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had to direct them around our negative examples. It has been taught that the African American, who was basically just the African, removed, the descendants of Africa, for those who choose to understand that they have contributed the least on this planet, from the journey of the caves of the earth to the mountains of the moon. What have we contributed? We are taught we contributed nothing. What did the African contribute? He contributed nothing. Everything came from Europe. Some things came from China. All the contributions of the Muslim scholars, Al-Hindi and others, don't count for anything. And the day may come when they may truly not count for anything. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed us. If there was ever a chosen people, it was the Muslim. Mankind needs the Muslim desperately. We who live in Sin City have a very special vantage point. We live in a city where if we picked up any holy book on the planet in any time period, and we read of a place where the minister said, come to my city, you can gamble 24 hours a day. Come to my city, we keep women scantily dressed for you 24 hours a day. Come to my city, alcohol flows like water. There is no stop to it, and no Sabbath gets in the way. You don't have to worry about a Saturday or Sunday or a Friday. These things never stop. We would know this is Babylon. This is a Sin City. But even Babylon didn't brag and call itself Sin City. No other city in the history of mankind has ever marketed sin. We have a special vantage point here, but so do our children. Another vantage point our children now have, we listen to the rappers and people defend them and they attack them. No people in the history of mankind have ever sang the filthy music, the degrading lyrics about their own mothers, sisters, grandmothers, children, daughters. What insanity is this? Nobody has ever taken their own women and held them up to disgraceful ridicule. They're paid well to say about our African American women the things that others used to say about us openly. But now through political correctness, they can't say them, so they pay them to say it. Don't think for a moment, brothers and sisters, that all these video games that our children are so addicted to are by accident or by chance. These are brilliant people who put together these games to draw our children's attention away. So while their Muslim fathers hang on a TV set for 10 hours watching football, and the children play these degrading games in their rooms, each one out of the other's way. Then when the football season is over, you got basketball. Then when the basketball season begins to wind, now they got MMA, this violent fighting form. Those Muslims who walk around and want to adapt dress to express piety, they'll watch an animal like a Mayweather fight. They'll watch rapists on the basketball court and pull for them to get an MVP. Our children have examples that are rotting their minds, and these things are not accidental. Dear brothers and sisters, it was said by a scholar in the 15th century in Timbuktu, whoever does not inform his children of his grandparents has destroyed his child, marred his descendants, and injured his offspring to the day he dies. Whoever does not make use of his ancestry has muddled his reason. Whoever is unconcerned with his lineage has lost his mind. Whoever neglects his origin, his stupidity has become critical. Whoever is unaware of his ancestry, his His incompetence has become immense. Whoever is ignorant of his roots, his intellect has vanished. Whoever does not know his place of origin, his honor has collapsed. We allow our children to call Africans African, not to give them the credit for being the people who distributed much knowledge across this planet. We don't tell them the brutality that they experienced. We don't tell them the reason these lands are rotting is because of bombings and attacks throughout centuries. We don't tell them about 1885 when Europe cut Africa up like a turkey and went in and butchered everything they could and drew minerals out. We don't tell them that the Swiss weren't eating chocolate at that time. They were eating each other. Nothing was happening good in Europe until they went to the Middle East and to Africa. Our children must be taught to respect this wondrous world that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created and not allow it to be made into a very narrow box and through computers. Let us pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not allow us to stand by and allow the contributions of our grandparents to be erased from the memories of man. Let us pray that Allah raises from our children those who are grateful and those who become the grandparents of those who are grateful. Dear brothers and sisters, I'd like to open with a short khutbah from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It was narrated by Murith bin Jabal that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said the following: acquire knowledge, for surely it leads to fear Allah. Seeking it is an act of worship. Studying it is praising Allah. Seeking it is jihad. Teaching it to whomever doesn't know it is an act of charity, and giving it to its people draws one closer to Him. Knowledge points to the permissible, the halal, and forbidden haram, and it is a shining light pointing the way to paradise. It comforts the lonely, befriends the estranged, and talks to you in seclusion. It is a guide through prosperity and adversity. It is a weapon against enemies, and it is the best of friends. With knowledge, Allah raises people to high stations, making them leaders in goodness, whose steps are traced. Their example is emulated, their opinion followed. The angels like to sit with the people of knowledge surrounding their wings. Everything dry or wet, fish of the sea and animals on land, will ask Allah to forgive them. Knowledge gives life to the heart in the midst of ignorance and illuminates visions in darkness. With knowledge, God's servants become the elite and reach the highest degrees in this life and in the hereafter. Contemplation with knowledge is equivalent to fasting. Spending time to study it is equivalent to standing in the night in prayer. Duties to relatives are fulfilled by it, and through it, the halal, haram are known. Knowledge precedes action. Action always follows it. The fortunate ones attain it, and the miserable ones are deprived of it. We have cited those things that draw our children into a box where they live in this virtual fantasy world, playing these games, conquering foes that don't exist. These things are shadows. To win one game and to go to a different level, they have wasted hours doing this process. Not saying don't let them play them. We don't want to have our children not be able to function in a normal way, but we must also put other things in there to help them as well. The great African-American scholar Carter G. Woodson, who wrote at a time when we were called Negroes and other things, reminds us those who have no record of what their forebears have accomplished lose the inspiration which comes from the teaching of biography and history. All of us here who have not read the book, The Miseducation of the Negro by Carter G. Woodson, I believe would benefit by doing so. And everywhere that you read the word Negro, substitute the word Muslim, and you may begin to see the ongoing problems of the Muslim community in integrating with the non-Muslim community, and it is not based upon the things that they indicate that it is. Many of us have mistakes in the rearing of our young. Those of us who are older, we've made mistakes raising our children. We've made mistakes in our past. And unfortunately, some of us, when we look in the rearview mirror of our lives, we see the carnage that we left behind. Disastrous lives, relationships, children in states of confusion. We say to ourselves sometimes, If I could do it over, I'd do it better. We have an opportunity not to go back and do our lives over, but we have an opportunity to insert ourselves into the lives of our young so they don't have that same vantage point as their years go by. We have to teach our young men how to be husbands, what it means to have respect for a human being, not to reduce women to one small itemized aspect and not recognize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He puts people together as husbands and wives, He gives us something very special. Across the table from us, from our spouse, in those very eyes that we look at and sometimes get tired of and are angry at and want to reduce to just something to fill some need, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put all the mysteries of the universe, if we know how to mind them. We can go through a marriage with a human being, and at the end, as that marriage draws to a close, as our lives draw to a close, we can find something we didn't expect when we got married. A friend. Somebody who doesn't say they love us because we do all kind of bad things to people we claim to love. Somebody who likes us. Somebody we like. Somebody who waits for us to come home. This becomes one of the key teaching points for our children. How does the mother respond when the father's key enters the door? When the father's key enters the door, is she happy and relaxed? Or does she instantly push the child away and start screwing around because something's not done? Bread's not finished, something has been picked up. The mother's the first teacher of the child, but she teaches them that too. How do you react to something stronger coming into your presence? All these things, how do you have a friendship with a human being? What a human being is. All these things were left to the Muslims to discover long before European philosophers started writing these nutty philosophies and become famous for them. Most of these philosophies and things they had taken from Muslims who had brought these things out of Greece. They reworked them because they had the time and neurosis to do so. Now they're famous and people are trying to apply Freud by these standards. Very good book that was written by a Muslim. It's called Don't Be Sad. I don't have his name. The name of the book is Don't Be Sad. And it's a very good book on all these different complicated problems. Teaching our children is a 24-hour task. While very young, they will listen to their parents. Young children want to cling to their parents. They're waiting to see what we do. We're waiting to see at a young age how we act. If they hear screaming and ranting and all these different things, their minds begin to shape around that at a very early age. Then at a certain point, and even a smaller point now than when I was young, they no longer want their parents. They're looking to not their peers, but that group above them. In other words, a 10-year-old watches the 15-year-old to see how he acts. That's the big boys. They would act like the big boys. If the big boys here walk out of that masala, punching each other, kicking each other, showing martial arts moves, the little boys learn that too. They learn there is no dignified way for a man to enter or exit his own place of worship. The big boys, they begin to look at the older men, the young men, to see how they act. If everything is how to shoot a basketball or playing some game about Islam, mashallah, alhamdulillah, and then the dialogue behind, they learn how to make bad marriages too. Every level, brothers and sisters, we have to accept our responsibility for setting a good example for our children. The danger exists for us who are parents, especially those who have young children who have not been born or are very young. Your child may leave the house with a very weak Assalamu alaikum. Your grandchildren may re-enter that home a few years later. Hey, Grandpa, how you doing? Anti-dawah. Anti-dawah. Leaving them in a state of confusion of how to apply Islam to the 21st century. We must seize those moments that we have the most influence in their lives. With the passage of time and increase of technology, the window of influence grows smaller. They must know their history. History is not everything, but it is a starting point. History is a clock that people use to tell the political and cultural time of day. They must be given all assistance to take advantage of educational opportunities afforded to them. They must have a relationship with the Quran. Many of the children that talked to over the years, they say, my father doesn't read the Quran unless he's trying to show me something I've done wrong in. no hadiths, unless he wants to show my mother or I this is something we're supposed to be doing. We must help our children